If you get to 5 employees and 500,000 in sales, what's the likelihood you're going to be around 5 years from there? Is it pretty high?
So if you come through an incubator, which is what we are, I think 79% of companies are successful. So it's very, very high versus a normal, 80% of companies fail in the first 2 years stat. There's 2 reasons. One is because we don't just let everybody in. And so we probably cut 40% of the companies that apply, we wouldn't let in because they're not ready. And so right away, we've sort of cut that failure rate in half because they would have maybe started a business, but they didn't start a business through us.
You're picking the ones that are prone for
We're picking
success.
the winners. Yeah, and exactly right. And then the second stage is we're wrapping around all the services, so IP protection, legal services, accounting, all the government agencies. And so where, as an entrepreneur, you might struggle to try and find out where to go, it's all kind of within our ecosystem. And so we sort of, a lot of what we do is play matchmaker. We'll sit down with someone and say, listen, I'm having a really hard time. I'm about to hire my second employee, or I've got I've hired one employee, I'm hiring a second one, and now I'm having challenges on how to structure one employee with the other. And Matthew Savino is one of our knowledge partners. Matthew might come in and sit down with half an hour and structure that out. Where
he's an HR company.
HR company, yeah. So if you were kind of on your own, then again, myself as someone who built a company here locally, we didn't have a cluster. I don't know how many times I sat there looking at the wall going like, who do I call, right? You don't want to reach out to just any local business because you want people to think that you're having a problem. Sometimes the problem is you can't just ask your staff, and so you're sitting there a lot of times as a CEO or as the entrepreneur kind of figuring it out for yourself. And if I think about the amount of money that I spent on mistakes that I've now been able to share with the companies that are there, it's tremendous, right? And so, once you make a mistake and you learn from it, that's knowledge you have. And so a lot of what, we're doing as mentors is passing that information back and hopefully making them more successful, which statistically is working.
So what were the elements that made being downtown Peterborough important? Because you mentioned the vacancy is run, but I don't know if there's any more. And then why expand into downtown Lindsay?
Sure. So our catchment area has always been, partly because of Fleming College, was basically all of Peterborough and Peterborough County and all of the city of Kawartha Lakes. And so we basically, when I came back on as a CEO, we kind of reinforced those boundaries because over time they'd shrunk a bit and said, listen, this is what we always talked about. There's a lot of water technology because of the Center for Alternative Wastewater and Treatment coming out of Lindsay as well, and there's a lot of companies there. And so basically that's why the physical presence has been something we found is very, very important. So most of the companies that are successful that come through our program, like if I was to take, we've already talked about 80% that are successful, but if I was to look at the 20% that are not successful, most of them didn't take space at some point in time. And so the physical side, and it's not because you're providing an office that's different from a home office, it's because we're putting them into an ecosystem where there's like-minded people around them. And usually we stagger it, so new companies that are coming in are sort of physically located close to a company that's a little more established. And so that staggering is a bit of an internal mentoring process. And so we wanted to make sure we launched the location in Lindsay to provide the same support. And we had a couple companies from Lindsay used to come to us. But again, they're driving for 45 minutes. They're out of their own kind of habitat and ecosystem. And so it was very important for us to put that there as well.
Is your startup money to create that space federal grants, or some of both?
So good question. So originally it came from the Ontario Centre of Excellence, so provincial government. Now we get funded by the college and the university, the city of Peterborough, the city of Kawartha Lakes. FedDev has a number of programs. Now FedDev funding we apply for every year, and so it's a bit of a, you don't actually know if you're going to get it until you apply, but we've been receiving some federal funding and then some provincial support as well. So we kind of cobble it together. Then there's some private support as well. We've had a number of people that have made donations. There's a number of people that are basically part of our either knowledge partner program. I think Jay actually is part of our program as well. So we've got different levels of sponsors, and they obviously help contribute as well. And kind of bring all that, we kind of take all that money and put it together and then work from there.
So what are some of the success stories that have come out of the incubation cluster?
So NobleGen's probably the biggest one, right? They've got a tremendous, I think it's 60 some odd million now they've raised. Yeah. They just got FDA approval for their products. So they've used Glina, which is basically an algae, and I'm probably not going to do it justice on the technical side, but basically it's an algae that they're drying and turning into a protein, and that protein basically can then be sold into the food market as a replacement protein, so whether it's energy bars, things like that.